What's up guys, I'm BTC. Hammond got a pretty big nerf recently, and the pros tell us how good they think he is and where he'll be able to be used. I've already talked about the nerfs that Hammond got in a previous video, so I'm going to keep a short recap of it. There were basically two bugs that were affecting his pile driver ability. The first was a double hit. If there was an object in the game that was kind of low to the ground and it had a slanted angle or a side on it, what would happen is when you use the pile driver, it would impact that surface and it would deal damage to all the enemies in the area. Then, because it was at an angle, Hammond would slide ever so slightly and he would hit the real ground underneath the object and he would impact the ground again and send out that damage. So instead of getting hit just once for 100 damage, some characters were getting hit twice. That would be 200 damage, potentially insta-killing a lot of characters. The second thing was the damage wasn't being dropped off like it should be. So the target that you directly hit takes maximum of 100, and all the other targets in the area, the further away they are, the less damage they take. The bug was that all of them would take the maximum amount of damage if you directly impacted any of them. So that needed to be fixed as well. Both of them have been resolved. The problem with this is now Hammond does significantly less damage than what he did before. Not by a little bit either. We're talking a massive amount of damage potential that he has now lost. The problem with this is now his damage is unbelievably low, like way too low. Remember, he doesn't have a barrier shield like Orisa or Reinhardt or Winston. He doesn't even have a defense matrix type thing. He can't even throw a bubble like Zarya. He's more in a situation where Roadhog is, where he just has a tremendous amount of health for himself and nothing for anybody else. But the problem is, his damage is now way below even what Roadhog's is. So it's just going to be really problematic, and I think they definitely need to compensate him in some way in order to make this more viable. That brings us to the next thing, which is earlier today, Blizzard released a bunch of pro-level tank players and what their opinions on Hammond are, where they think he's going to be in the meta, if he's any good, if he's viable, all that sort of stuff. Now, let's be totally blunt and honest here. These opinions that were released by these pro tank players are very much filtered, okay? If any of these players genuinely believe that the character was garbage and that he wasn't worth using, Blizzard would never publish their opinion on it, okay? It's just not gonna happen. This is supposed to be like a PR thing, a marketing thing. Blizzard wants to say, oh, look at this new character, what did the pros think? If any of these pro players actually said something seriously negative about the character, Blizzard just wouldn't put it. And I can tell you already, when I was reading through some of these opinions, it was very obvious that a couple of these guys were like, this character is garbage, I don't ever want to play him, I want to use something else instead, blah blah blah. But they had to reword it in a very tactful way. Just keep that in mind, okay? Take all of this with a grain of salt. But that's why you guys come here, because you want accurate information and brutally honest opinions. Also, I don't know if these opinions were given before or after the nerf. And if they were before, then it would be even worse. So we're going to start with Fisher. He says, Wrecking Ball is not an easy hero to play as a pro. His big characteristic is the fact that he requires a lot of teamwork. If the team cannot support him, then it's hard to play. I've been practicing Wrecking Ball a lot, and I've realized that there are counters to him. You're not going to see him as often as you think. You're going to see a lot of Reinhardt and Winston, but there's a window of opportunity for Wrecking Ball to come out. That's a very neutral, non-committal opinion. Next is Custa. He says, Wrecking Ball is an interesting substitute for Winston and Dive. He's very self-sustainable and has a ton of mobility. His biggest weakness is that he just doesn't protect the team. If you're looking for an offensive tank, he's probably the best option out there. Throughout the World Cup, you'll probably see a lot of Winston and Wrecking Ball from tanks if they're not playing 3 tanks, 3 supports. Next up is Bishu. He says, Wrecking Ball is very niche. I'm glad he was introduced, but after playing enough of him, I was just like, wow, Diva is just so good, and there's nothing that can substitute for her. Everyone thought he was going to be the next flex tank, but nah, he is incredibly fun to play. When I was on the PTR, I was practicing him during playoffs, and my coach had to tell me to stop. I was just having so much fun, though. So you can tell that Bishu doesn't like the character. He thinks it's fun to play just in kind of a goof around kind of whatever, but for serious gameplay competition, that Hammond is definitely subpar to the other things that are available, and that he's not worth using, and that he's probably never going to want to play the character. But clearly he can't say that, so he said it in a very indirect way. Next up is Gamsu. He says, at first I thought Wrecking Ball was going to allow for more dive, but now that I've watched more pro play, because Wrecking Ball allows you to get your ultimate faster, he's going to be used more as a counter to other heroes. I don't think he's going to be picked straight out of spawn, but rather used later. This one's kind of disappointing because essentially what it seems like he's saying is, don't use Hammond unless you're trying to stall the point, or unless they have a particular backline hero that's giving you problems. Other than that, just don't use the character. Again, pretty disappointing. Next up is Fate. He says, the most important thing for Wrecking Ball is knowing when to go in. He's the type of hero that you can't use in every composition. It really depends on what the opponent's composition is. Really, the most important thing is timing. So this is, again, it's a very tactful way of saying, don't use the character, he's not very viable. But, you know, maybe there might be some situations where you can throw him out there and he might be effective. Next one is Mickey. He says, Wrecking Ball can go in very fast and escape very fast, but there are so many heroes to easily counter, either stun or wall or whatever. So many things can stop him, but still, he can go super fast. He's Sonic, apparently. He's the fastest hero in the game. High hit points, but just no damage. And the crowd control is hard to use, because it's a knock-up effect, knock-away effect. It's not actually a stun or anything like that. So again, he's putting a very positive spin on the very kind of like little things that Hammond can do. But as you can see, he's probably saying, yeah, this character really isn't good enough to use. I wouldn't use him. There's only a couple of situations. Next is Arc. He says, I think Wrecking Ball is good at getting all the attention from opponents, just running away and being alive. I think that's his good ability compared to Winston, and I think he really shines in team plays. So this is kind of a mixed bag. It seems like basically you want to be the bullseye and have everyone on the enemy team attacking you, and it'll open up some space. I mean, that's kind of what a bunch of tanks do, is they provide space for their team. But again, he's clearly saying that, yeah, you pretty much just run in, try to get their attention, and run away. But the thing is, if they're smart enough to not attack you, then you're just as ineffective as a Roadhog would be, basically. When you have two targets, a Roadhog or a Mercy, what are you going to attack? You're going to attack the Mercy, right? You don't attack the Roadhog. Same thing with Hammond. Like, if you have two targets, you ignore the Hammond because he can't do any damage, and you just kill the rest of his team, and then you can focus on him later. Next up is iRemix. He says, Wrecking Ball is a tank that is able to dive in on his own and create a lot of space for his DPS by stunning characters in the air. They don't actually get stunned, by the way, it's just a knock-up effect. And being able to survive after the engage. My impression from professional play is that Hammond was being used a lot to counter triple compositions. So triple tank, triple support. Because he's able to create a lot of space and survive longer than other tanks, my advice for playing Wrecking Ball, coordinate when you are going in, study the grapple spots for different maps, and after you engage, focus on always surviving. And then the very last one is from Muma, and he seems to be the only one that actually liked the character and wants to use him in competitive play. So that's why I saved him for last. He says, he's a very dive-oriented hero, so his backline pressure on the enemy team is actually pretty extreme. It makes playing a lot of static, low-mobility heroes a lot harder, because he's just so fast. He also has pretty surprising amount of ability to peel for his backline. I think if people get really good at him, he could be one of the better heroes. Definitely, probably the best hero they've introduced. I don't think that he's the best hero they've ever introduced at all. I think Ana probably takes that spot by a long shot. I mean, they had to pretty much redesign the entire game around Ana being able to support multiple tanks, so I think Ana probably takes that crown. He seems to be the only player among those asks that is genuinely interested in playing the character in a competitive setting. The rest of them were, as I mentioned earlier, it seemed pretty filtered, right? Like, you could tell that some of these guys were like, no, he's garbage and I never ever want to use him. but they're not gonna say that because Blizzard will never publish it. So they were like, oh yeah, he's, you know, he's kind of a niche pick, I guess. He's got a ton of counters, and, but he can go fast. He can go super fast. Gotta go fast. So again, you know, take that for what it's worth. And again, I don't know if this was asked before or after his nerfs, but with these nerfs, I think Hammond's gonna be in a pretty bad spot, really. And I think that's really disappointing, because the character is a lot of fun, and I think he has a lot of potential, but he just isn't going to be good enough. So I hate to say it, but it's not really looking too good. What do you guys think? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.